Don't give me the wheel of death, computer. Come on.
Okay, I don't see you yet.
All right, I'm showing live on my end. I don't see anyone on yet. Do you?
Oh, there you are.
Oh, look at Debbie Waris. Hi there. We'll give everybody a couple of minutes to jump on, and then we'll get this party started. It is currently actually 1 after 1 Eastern time, so I will be starting off promptly at 3 after. Jennifer Praise online. Say hi to Jen.
Hi, Jen.
Awesome. Boy, everybody is jumping on. Wow, all right. And cool. Well, hello, Wendy. Hello, Michelle. Hello, Nadisha. All right. You want me to go ahead and get started? We got some people on.
Yeah, let's go ahead.
All right. Hello, little Bart. So, my name is James Helton. Welcome to Keune Academy Live. Welcome to all my friends throughout the world that have joined us today. Um, I'm the Creative Design Ambassador for Keune North America, and today we are going to be basically talking about texture. Now, I also have with me on the phone line to field questions, that sort of thing, Miss Jessica Mills, our VP of Education and Shows, who without all of this would not have ever been possible. So everybody give her a big shout out. And so basically, we're here to talk today about cutting, designing, texture. I've thrown in a few extras on that as well. So, and there will be a surprise at the end. So, if you are here now, it would behoove you to stay on until the end because we have a nice big surprise for you guys at the end for later on. So, one of the things that I would first off like to say is textured hair it is a lot of people feel very impassioned about textured hair design. All right, people have very strong belief systems and what works, what doesn't work, what they like, what they don't like, and I'm here to support that. I'm not here to tell you that you're wrong and that sort of thing. What I'm sharing today is what either I know to be true based on my experience or the fundamentals of just hair design in general, and what I have found to work for myself personally. My real intent for the program today is to just basically enhance what you already know. I know that affirmation of something can be really huge and powerful. So if I'm doing something and you're like, oh, I'll do it that way, then awesome. If I'm doing something and you are like, well, I've never thought about doing that way, awesome. That's the intent. And of course, to answer any questions that you may have concerning cutting textured hair, styling textured hair, product choice, that sort of thing. And we will be working a little bit later on down the road with curl identification. I'm sure some of you have seen that on the Keune Professional Facebook page. I've also put it in my stories a couple of times as well. So, to start off with, a point to ponder. When we cut, design, color, or basically style hair, one of the chief thing that we're doing is we're either trying to add dimension, depth, we're trying to create movement or motion. So one of the challenges with cutting textured hair is this. What do you do when what you're working on is already in motion, which is what curly and textured hair is from my perspective. It is already off the head. It is already doing its thing. Even if it's just wavy, there is no really combing that into natural fall. You can comb bone straight hair into natural fall because it falls. Textured hair has a tendency to not fall. It either grows out or it moves on its own. So that is, I think, one of the greatest challenges to cutting and coloring textured hair is what do you do? And so how do you cut or shoot a moving target, right? So you kind of have to think ahead of how am I going to handle this? What am I going to do? How am I going to color it? What is my intent? What is my goal? All of that, even more so than you do when you're cutting non-textured hair. So one of the ways that I approach this is what I refer to as my creative strategy, or how do I put together an inspiration piece for my guest, or when I'm doing something at the academy or something like that. One of the first things I do is I gather pictures for what I want to work on. And that's just, the creative strategy of finding what I like to see. I love this. I love longer looks. I love really activated texture like you'll see here as well. So one of the things that I picked up from my friend Jessica Bartolucci on her live last week is she talked a lot about Pantone colors and using the Pantone chart for color inspo, right? So she talked about fall colors, oranges, reds, goldens, sunsets, that sort of thing. Peach nougat, I think, was the one that she also threw out there. So my thing was, there has to be more to fall colors than just oranges and reds. So I went on a hunt and found that there was a military olive, there was an ultramarine green, and I don't know if it comes through really well on the live screen, but you also have something referred to as green sheen, which I think is a relatively obnoxious form of chartreuse, which for me, the more obnoxious chartreuse is, the more I like it pretty much. So there's that for my color strategy. And one of the things I also found was there wasn't a lot of ladies or gentlemen out in the world really that had textured hair that had green hair. So I was forced to pull some green images of straighter hair and just pick out colors that I liked. Like there's that green sheen is in there. A little bit more of a deeper green sheen there. A little bit more of that ultramarine in these two. And a hint of the military olive up there. So what that ends up looking like when I put it together is this young lady right here. As you can see, I lifted her base a little bit and did a very olivey root, stretched that out with some brighter green, and got the ends a little bit greener than the chartreuse color, but you can see working in through there is some more yellowy green tones. And this is our example, our benchmark that we're going to work off of today. One of the things I would like to point out is this. These two ladies are essentially the same haircut. And see what I mean by earlier, you are working with hair that is already in motion versus needing to put hair into motion. She does have some loose texture in there, but nothing like what a textured hair guest or model would look like when you're finished with them and that sort of thing. So that is kind of my inspiration for today's class was this young lady. This is kind of how I got to that decision and worked through that process. I encourage you to do that when you're working with guests, when you're working behind a chair. Put together an inspo board. Find out what colors, obviously this is a vivid client, even though it's not super bright. We did use color chameleon on this. If you're interested in formulas, I can for sure post those at a later date. Just leave that in the comments. But basically, we did a lot of green. We did a lot of yellow. We did the dark as well as clear from our color chameleon range, which is our direct dye range. So that having been said, we will definitely move on to the cutting portion of this, which is what you guys are all here for today anyway. So here is our model Dion. I have already cut this portion of Dion's head just because of there's some things that we need that I would like to go through with you outside of cutting when it comes to styling and product choice and that sort of thing. What we will be doing is the right hemisphere of the head, everything above the parietal, and cutting of the fringe in the front. So what I'll do is I'll take this off. As you can see, this right hand side here, I've already sectioned that at the parietal with a horizontal section. You will section that through the top, starting at the apex of the head, drawing a vertical section from the apex of the head down behind the ear, as well as through the center of the back as well. We will work on the fringe after we get finished with this hemisphere, the top, and that sort of thing. One thing that I would like to mention about cutting textured hair is this. Make sure that if you are going to if you're not going to cut it where it lives, which is often referred to as hedging or whatever you want to call that, which I have no problem with that. That's a great method for cutting hair for cutting textured hair because you are literally cutting it where it's going to stay. Now, the only challenge you may find there is what happens when you want a really dynamic shape, where you need to take the hair out of where it lives and work on predicting where it's going to go once you release it. So a great rule of thumb is make sure that your hair is always wet and less is more. Always. Start with a little and work your way up from there. And I will use this as an example on the back here as we work through this. I like to take from the occipital, which is right about here. On a mannequin head, the easiest way to find that is put it on the back, lay the comb flat, and where the comb comes off the head is their occipital. Obviously, on an individual with a pulse, that would be a little bit easier, and you would not do that as well. So I like to draw a diagonal line from the occipital to the outside corner of the hairline. I'm going to pin this up out of my way. There are two types of clips in the world. There are clips that have basically little teeth on them, and then there are clips that are smooth, that don't have teeth. When you're working on textured hair, I would always recommend a clip that is smooth because you don't want to agitate that hair any more than necessary. I always like to start off with a little prep of, we talk a lot about two-phase spray in our culture at Keune, which is lovely product, wonderful product. Use it all the time. Textured hair, you might want to start to think about satin oil milk, especially if you're not working on super fine textured hair. Satin oil milk is a very light, very conditioning leave-in spray that I like to use on hair that, I don't know, is a little lackluster. Maybe it is, maybe it needs a little bit more sheen, that sort of thing. So we're going to split this in half. I'm going to pin that out of the way. That's what splitting that in half looks like. You're going to split that in half vertically. All right. And then we're going to come in. I've already picked up a piece of my guide from the other side. I'm going to drop this down. Now, one of the things people like to do is when you're cutting straight hair, that's what you see. When you cut textured hair, you need to be able to see that. You need to see that hair bounce back a little bit. And just cut a very sawtoothy little line there. What that does is that allows that texture to move, which it's going to do anyway. If you get into the habit of like little snip, 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 especially on hair this coarse and this textured, you're going to find that you will struggle with that somewhat. Not necessarily in getting it accurate, but in the way that it moves when it starts to dry and starts to pick up. Because, remember, the coilier the hair is, the more it's going to shrink. So the more hyper textured hair is up that scale, the more shrinkage you're going to get. And then once again, bringing this down, letting that hair bounce back. And we're just cutting a horizontal line across that back, parallel to the floor. And now what I'm going to do is we're going to elevate that hair to approximately 30 degrees. Like that's approximately 45. I'm going to knock that down to just about there and take those little bitty ends off there. What that will start to do, if you will notice, is you will start to see where that hair, you see where that hair just picked up, and now you almost have a 45-degree angle graduation just based off of 30-degree elevation. So that's what I mean when I talk about less is more, right? From that, I'm just going to draw a horizontal line, another horizontal section off of that point at the occipital. Just draw a horizontal parting across there. You're going to split that in half again. You're going to bring that back up to 30 degrees approximately. Let that hair bounce a little bit and come across that way. One of the things that I would like to point out is when you're cutting, most people that have been on a program with me before, whether it's digitally or in person, knows that I like to work I like to be able to work on what I'm working on. So I have a tendency to clip things out of my way, which I do encourage you to do. The point of that is when you're working on textured hair for this particular design, I want you to stay 90 degrees from the section you're working on. So the middle of your chest should be going to the center of that section. The reason for that is if you attempt to cut this around the head here like this, staying basically kind of taking that out of its where it lives, what you're going to get is this front corner piece here is going to pop. And then you're going to have a horseshoe design back here instead of a straight line across the back. And if you notice from our model, if you look at her, where is she? You can already see that that does angle back already. And that is simply from what we will do in the front and how the hair pops back when you do cut it. How's everybody doing out there?
Good so far. James had a question. Is the flip chart page behind your welcome page just solid white?
Is it? Actually, the page behind it is solid white, but I do have a little bit of that to show.
Yeah, I think she said it's solid behind you because her hair is so dark.
Okay.
That'd be great.
Perfect.
Everyone's love it. It says they're learning a lot.
Well, that's awesome. So again, remember, a little satin oil milk, due to the fact that a lot of times really textured hair can be moisture deprived, that sort of thing. Always love for hair to be as shiny as it can be, right? And satin oil milk definitely helps with that. So again, we're going to just bring this out here, making sure that we're working in those vertical sections, working to control the hair. Because you definitely don't want more hair than your hand can hold. And I always like to say, no more than the width of your comb. So as you can see, most often than not, I'm working off of the width of my comb there. And there we go. Being able to use the screen as a mirror is always beneficial and always reminds me to make sure to remind everyone else that when you're cutting hair in general, always remember to use your mirror as a tool to make sure that your lines, that your actual body position is where it needs to be based on what your intended outcome is. If nothing else, just to make sure your guest's head is where it needs to be. Because, in the 21st century, I guess we're in now, getting towards the middle end of that, people definitely do not like to have their head in a natural and upright position, which, if I may say, if it's not in a natural and upright position, then you aren't cutting the hair how it's going to lay. You are cutting the hair for how they're sitting. So unless they're going to sit around, walk around and, use their thumbs and be sad all day long every day, then I would encourage you to have them always in a natural and upright position. Moving on to this front quadrant, notice that just behind the ear, all right, is that vertical parting to separate the front from the back. I don't like to use the top of the ear most often than not because I like to take my guide from here to avoid popping that guide out there. So if you take your point of reference from behind the ear, you draw your horizontal parting there to continue on into the front. I'll split that in half slightly vertically. Take that down, elevate that out at about 30 degrees, and very gently take those ends off. And do the same in front of the ear. That way, you have consistency working through to that front, and you don't have a huge pop there at the ear. Because believe me, and I'm sure I don't have to tell some of you, if straight hair will embarrass you, textured hair will humiliate you. And that is one of the danger zones, I guess you might say. I have, in my time, most of what I've learned about textured hair, I've learned by doing in the beginning. And when you learn by doing, you oftentimes has some, you might have an unintended result periodically here and there. So if I can share that with you guys and help out in any way from that happening while you're behind the chair, my day has been, I have won the day, basically. So now we are going to move up into the layering portion of this haircut. You will take a center guide, which I've already cut here. This guide, let me do this real fast. Hi. You will have a center guide that is approximately, I'm assuming that's around 6 inches-ish, give or take, will be your guide for the top. Now what you will do, still working off that same sectioning pattern before, you will now take a vertical section from the top of the head all the way down to the nape. You will clip this out of your way, starting from just above the parietal. You're going to comb this out 90 degrees horizontal until you see where your guide starts to pop out there on that top. An easy way to make sure that you're staying 90 degrees horizontal or vertical with your finger angle is to make sure that your elbow is touching your hip bone. All right? That way you can see here that you're 90 degrees horizontal from the head, and if you tuck that elbow, your fingers will naturally be 90 degrees vertical. So we're essentially cutting a square layer on this. So you'll just cut top to bottom, always making sure, even myself that has relatively large hands, I like to make sure that the tension is even on this, and you just work from top to bottom. Now there is one small caveat to this, and that is that my projection or over direction is back to this vertical line. That will not be the way it is for every section, but every section you cut, you will over direct. So we're going to split that down the center. I'm going to move this out of my way, clip that off to the side, and I'm going to take another approximate 1 inch section vertically, and we're going to clip that out of the way as well. Again, starting at just either at or above the parietal. This is 90 degrees horizontal. We're going to slightly over direct that to basically our right hand side of our section. And we're going to work down the head here. Can anyone tell me why you would over direct this to the previous cut section? I'll wait. I've waited long enough. The reason that we over direct to the previous cut section is if you will notice, there is quite a bit of width in this hair design here. With curly hair, the slightest, or textured hair, the slightest bit of over direction creates a lot of push, okay? So if you really want to expand that hair out this way across the back, which by the time you get around to the sides creates quite a bit of width, period, short hair pushes long hair. And that little bit of push creates a lot of direction. And I feel a lot more secure doing it that way anyway. If you were wanting to keep the same silhouette, you wouldn't need to do that necessarily, but I would for sure still make sure that those sections are overlapping and that sort of thing to create a more fluid design.
Actually, Debbie said, so there won't be an empty space behind the ear?
Well, yes, that is actually true too. Thank you, Debbie. That will definitely come into play as we move around the head here into that ear section. And thank you for that, Debbie. One of the things I'd also like to point out as well as we work around the head here is, again, you're still standing 90 degrees center to what you're working on, okay? That way your elevation is always consistent, your over direction is always consistent. If body position is important in hair design on the regular, when cutting textured hair, it is imperative. Because you can, and I have done this in my younger days, you can for sure get lost in your design. And always staying center of your work, even when you're over directing, definitely keeps you from getting lost in your design. And at least if you find an inconsistency, you'll be able to go back and figure out where that happened a little bit more easily. So as you can see here, obviously I picked the worst day to wear a black shirt. You can see here that this is starting to round off here. Even though we cut a 100% square vertical layer, this top is still starting to kind of start to round off and droop, which we will address that here in a moment. I was discussing with a colleague of mine the other night that you can take and cut a perfectly square shape, 90 degrees vertical on the sides, 90 degrees horizontal on the top, and with textured hair, it will bunch up and create a more domey type shape. And I will demonstrate here in just a moment how we can get around that and how to prevent that from happening. As Debbie had said before, here we are over directing just slightly behind the ear. In the coming section, we will be coincidentally, based on where our guide was before, we will be over directing to just right at the point of the ear. That way you don't get that, I don't know, the term I use, I'm sure it's not the appropriate term to use, but the term I use is so you don't get a hole behind the ear, right? I like to call that no man's land.
I have a question for you, James.
Yes, ma'am. Fire away.
Can you cut from bottom to top without changing the cut too much?
Can you cut from bottom to top without changing the design too much? You can. I will never say you can't, because you can. However, to demonstrate, this is top to bottom. With my elbow into my hip, there's not much gonna happen here. I can be out here, I can see in the mirror as to where my elevation and over direction is, as well as very easily see my finger angle if I want to go out here or whatever. Now, I'm going to turn her, let's go this way. I'll get in front of her. Cutting bottom to top. There's not a lot of, I can't always see exactly where I'm at, cutting top or bottom to top. And one of the things that will happen is, if you're cutting from bottom to top, you may accidentally pick that up as your guide. And part of this particular shape is using the guide that's on the top. We had a situation one time in a class where an individual, we were cutting a square layered haircut. We were cutting the square layered haircut from bottom or from top to bottom, which creates, you know, the type of silhouette I showed you on the straight haired lady earlier. Okay, it's just a razor cut version of that. The individual started at the bottom and attempted to connect the bottom to the top, which what ended up happening was they didn't let enough of the bottom drop out, and instead of a shag like you saw earlier on the orange-haired lady, you ended up with more of a shorter, I'm going to say Keith Richards style shag, which was way in here and a little bit more wide at the top instead of being consistently wide from top to bottom. So to fully answer your question is yes, you can do that. You just need to be extra special careful that if you're going to cut from bottom to top, you cut from bottom to top all the way around the head, and that when you elevate your section, you check with where you want your guide to be on the top before you cut. So it's almost like you're measuring 3 times. I prefer to do it this way because for me it's more efficient and it's more accurate. If you're not accustomed to cutting palm to palm like this, then it will be a little cumbersome in the beginning for you, but I promise you, as someone that's been in the industry for 30 years and am approaching the not a spring chicken part of my life anymore, um, you will learn to love this in the fact that you're not doing that. You are, which is a very unnatural position versus that. I know that was a long form answer, and I hope I answered that person's question. So as we move to the front, we are going to still take that piece there. We're going to over direct to our previous cut, or the backside of our part of our section here, and just remove that little bit of length there. That
So while you're working, James, would your approach to the design be different if the hair was maybe denser?
I would, yes, yes. The question was, would my approach to this design be different if the hair were denser? My approach would be to make sure that my vertical cutting sections were smaller. I might be a lot more aware of the length I was taking off in the beginning, because if your hair is denser, it would make sense to me that it would expand more after it's cut, meaning that there are more hairs to pile up on more hairs to create more width, more height, and more shrinkage in the end. So I would still use the same sectioning. I would just be more aware of two things, and that is the length I was removing and the width of the sections that I were taking. Did that answer the question?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, so on the top, to prevent, now you can really see that this is really starting to just drop off in the back and get kind of droopy. Using how the hair is going to react to our benefit, meaning that when you cut it, it essentially pulls back against the head like that. We are going to take a horizontal section across the back of that back quadrant there. We are going to over direct that 90 degrees vertical to the apex of the head. And I am going to remove approximately 1 inch. If you want to be more aggressive with this, that is totally okay. A rule of thumb is to make sure when you're cutting it that you don't remove so much length that you're still removing length when you drop below the parietal ridge, because that is where a lot of that shape starts to take place. Now, even on wet hair, what I would like to show you is this. Before, you remember how it drooped off. Now you can see where it literally stands up off the head and creates a much more dynamic appearance for your guest. And I would do the same, moving to this front quadrant as well. Pick up a point from the back as your reference. You are going to comb, you're going to section, your horizontal section is going to be across that diamond, okay? So if you have a triangle that gets formed from sectioning this off, which is right here, your section is gonna go across that horizontally, not parallel with the center parting. I hope everybody followed that.
James, you're at 15.
All right. We'll go ahead and remove this. Now there are numerous Keune products to use to support your design. One of the things that I like to always keep in mind is textured hair has a tendency to be, just in general, more moisture deprived than other textures of hair, meaning straight, not curly, that sort of thing. It also has a tendency, especially in finer textured hair, to be a little more tangled. So the skinnier the hair, the more tendency it has to be tangly. This girl here does not have skinny hair, and she is quite a treat to comb out. And one of the things that I would also like to mention is that you may take note that curlier hair can also be a little more fragile. It can, since it's moisture deprived, since it can be more tangly, it can also break off a little easier. So keeping that in mind with your product selection. Things that I like to use on textured hair is going to be, my top 4 are Curl Control Defining Cream from the Care range, as well as your Curl Boost Spray from the Care range. These will encourage curl. So if you have someone, let's say, that likes to sit in this type 2, 2B, 2C range, then they would be perfect. You need something in there to encourage the curl to form, which wood fibers inside of the curl complex for curl control from our Care line definitely encourages the hair to bend and curl more. If you already have really curly hair, like a type 3 or even a type 4, my big go-tos there are going to be Style Curl Cream, which is this guy right here. And as paradoxical as it may seem, where'd you go? Style Straight Cream. Because one of Straight Cream's properties is it's an emollient and it helps to work on the hair not being frizzy. Works against frizz. And we definitely don't want our curly ladies to have frizzy hair. So that is a wonderful product to use as well. Now, if you need something a little more grippy for your textured hair clients, blend Salt Mousse. Awesome product to use. Gives a real nice full beachy wave, really helps to enforce that curl and support it as well. So now we are to the fringe. Make certain that we are parted down the center of the top from the apex of the head to the center of the nose. So from here to here. Then the outside of the eyebrow on this lady and on most people, humans in general, That's the orbital bone. If you will take your comb from the orbital bone, rock it to the top, that's going to be the back side of your fringe. On her, I like to take this parting, what I like to call at the top of her recession here. That way, when I cut it and it pushes out, it pushes slightly into her design. Clip that back. We're going to repeat that on the other side. Again, orbital bone, rocking that up to the top at just the top round of her recession, again on that side. This is a relatively classic approach to a fringe that you would cut on a shag, except I'm going to do it slightly different for my textured client today. Most of the time, you would take your section, you would elevate it out just like this, you would twist that, you would drop it down, and you would take that off. What we're going to do today is this. I'm going to take a horizontal section approximately a ½ inch inside the hairline, following the hairline. So it will not be 100% straight across. It will be slightly curved. Then we will pinch this together, twist it over, bring this down, let it pop slightly. I like to keep it right at her nose. Come across just like that. Then what I will do is I will elevate this 90 degrees, and if there is any point on that, I will take that off, which on this particular section there was not. I will drop this back down, the entire remainder of the section. Bring this forward, twist it again, drop it down to the nose, let that pop, and really take some pretty deep sawtooth sections there. Now this you will elevate to the top of your fringe section. You will have a slight point there. You will take that off. What that does is it creates bounce in the top of that fringe. To create a more dynamic fringe, resection a smaller section inside of that. Clipping this back out of your way so that you have a small section that looks something like that. Drop that down, pinch, twist slightly above the nose. See if there's any point to that. A little bit right there. And one last time, using about a ½ inch size parting, you will create another mini fringe section in that front. Pinch, twist, bring in. I like to bring it about mid bridge of the nose. Cut that off. No point there. So when you release those back down, you have a fringe that automatically arches around the front. The center of that sitting almost dead center of her eyebrow. Um, what questions do you guys have out there? Was that enjoyable? Did you guys have fun? Did you get some helpful tips, I hope?
Amazing.
Well, thank you. I at least have one fan. It's good that you're a fan, though, right?
You know I'm a fan.
So
Like
what?
you're cutting my hair.
Do what?
It's just like you're cutting my hair right now.
It's, I thought a lot about you when I was cutting this hair. A lot about you. So there is some alternative, uses or products. If you have a situation that calls for, say, salt mousse from Blend, as we mentioned earlier, this young man here, where is it at? There we go. But you don't want something quite that grippy. An easy fix to that is soft mousse from Style and salt mist, soft mousse from Style and salt mist from Style as well. Combine these two on the hair and you will get a slightly softer approach to a salt mousse. And I know not everyone likes the real grippy, super salty type of approach that salt mousse does have. If you have a finer haired client, soft mousse and salt mist are awesome combos to use. One of my other favorites to use as a dry finisher is this guy here. After I dry every client, I use one of a couple of different dry finishers on people, that being one, fiber wax being another from Blend. And if you have someone that has some really dense hair to, maybe you're really trying to piece out those curls and get some definition, forming wax is a great one. And if you're looking for that same kind of appearance, but you need a lighter finish, spray wax is amazing for that. And one or two last things. Again, we talk about moisture in the hair. So Pure moisture treatment or moisturizing overnight repair, use that as a cutting lotion. Use it very sparingly. A little goes a long way. But to tell you anything, on Dion here, I used curl cream, I used straight cream, I used overnight moisture repair, and I used satin oil milk as my cutting lotion and my preparatory stylers for her. And you can see that there's no bogging down the hair. The hair is still very full and movable. And everybody loves dry shampoo. So one of my favorite things to talk about textured hair is its very under-celebrated next door neighbor, which is dry conditioner. All right? A lot of the same properties as dry shampoo, you're just putting a little bit more condition back in the hair. So great thing to keep in mind when you want to talk about moisture deprivation and that sort of thing. I would mention Humidity Shield, but I think everybody has pretty much gotten acquainted with Humidity Shield. And if you have not, then I suggest you do. This will change your life, in my opinion. So, as promised, I hope everyone enjoyed the program. I have approximately 60 seconds. Hey, can I time it or can I time it? On Friday, on Keune Professional's Facebook page, my good friend George Alderetti will be on here doing a coloring textured hair pop-up event. So if you are on this, please join us on Friday for George's event when he talks about coloring textured hair. Um, in the same principles as we talk about cutting hair. You know, when you have to take it outside of where it lives, how can we predict how it's going to go back to where it's going to sit? All right. Um, Thank you so much to all my friends around the world who joined us today. I cannot tell you how much I appreciate your participation. Without you guys, this would be for naught. Okay? So thank you for joining us. Thank you for being around when we do these things. And I look forward to seeing you next time. As always, please practice, practice, practice. Stay safe and enjoy your time. I'll see you again next time. Thank you. Bye.